Professionalism, but I'll do it anyway since it's in the book. Professionalism means that you act like you're supposed to act when you're doing something professional. Okay. That's what professionalism is. As a college professor, the question is, do I have to dress professionally? Well, how does a college professor dress? Evidently in Hawaiian shirts on Thursday, right? And jacket, I don't know. I mean, we all dress differently, right? But it has to be appropriate. We haven't even started that part yet. Okay, so what is professional? A professional is a person who has specialized training for a particular career and who acts in a conscientious, appropriate way in the workplace. So you have to act a certain way. In other words, you can't, I don't know, swear, I guess. Is this yours? Could be. Okay, all right. Did I find somebody else's pen? Nobody? I'm not even selling it, I'm giving it away. No? Okay. So it looks like a nice pen. I thank you, my family thanks you. Whoever I sell it to thanks you. Being a professional involves conducting yourself in an appropriate manner. Does that mean you have to be grouchy all the time? Isn't that how professionals act? No? I don't know. Do they? Some of them do. Okay. You need to dress appropriately, of course. You need to put on the clothes that everybody else is wearing, I guess. A uniform, you have to wear your uniform. This is my uniform. Well, maybe not the Hawaiian shirt. Be organized. Be timely. In other words, be on time. And record all the meetings that you go to. This is a hard part. You have to take notes when you're having meetings with your clients or your colleagues. And be prepared for whatever the meeting is. Yesterday we had a meeting, SBSS had a meeting. There is no SBSS anymore. There used to be, but there isn't anymore. Now it's business/SBSS. But we had an SBSS meeting and we had all this stuff that we were going to talk about. And I took a notebook and I pretended I was going to write something that I didn't. So I guess I'm not very professional. I apologize. I apologize to my colleagues. I was supposed to volunteer for something and I didn't. We'll see what happens next. Okay, so being a professional involves acting responsibly at all times. And as far as I'm concerned, my responsibility isn't to the institution. My responsibility is to you guys. So as far as I'm concerned, all I need to do is make sure you guys are taken care of. That's my idea of professionalism. Sometimes you join an organization and the organization wants you to be loyal to them. But when you're in a teaching situation, who should you be loyal to? Especially if it's a conflict between the students and the administration. Who should you be loyal to? What do you think? Who's more important? You or you? The money that they give me or you guys? It must be the money. Okay, so you have to be loyal, but you have to decide who you're going to be loyal to. This is a question that's coming up right now because it seems that in the current administration, not this administration at this college, but the administration controlling the country, there are some people that are saying we're trying to protect the country from some of the negative things that are happening with the president. So some people are saying that we're more loyal to the country than we are to the president. This is really kind of interesting. I mean, it's really kind of fascinating to see how this thing's going to play out. Hopefully, nothing will be destroyed except for Puerto Rico, of course. We're hoping that there's a hurricane that's hitting the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina right now. And if the administration doesn't react properly, then potentially thousands of people could die. Thousands of people died in Puerto Rico. So we'll see what happens. I hate to say that. because, well, I hate people to die just to show that something isn't working quite correctly, but that's what's happening right now. So the question is, if you're a member of the federal government, should you be loyal to what you consider the United States or to the current administration? Really? Okay. I was just wondering. It makes sense to me, but then again, I would probably get fired if I were working for this administration, so that's okay. So you need to act responsibly all the time. You need to behave as a mature adult. You need to use language that is culturally appropriate and age appropriate, also understandable to the individuals that you're dealing with, and not offensive to anyone, which isn't always the easiest thing in the world. But culturally appropriate is really kind of interesting that they put that in here, because we're dealing with we're dealing with three authors from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, which is in southern Indiana. And there's only one or two cultures in Indiana. There is no native culture in Indiana. Those people left in the 1820s. So there's primarily just an African-American culture and a white culture. To some extent there's a Hispanic culture, but it's not very large. You need to speak honestly, and you need to speak with integrity. You need to know how to communicate the information that you're dealing with. And that is how we are professionals. Each setting has different expectations. So in the classroom, the expectations are one thing. The administration doesn't have anything to do with me in here. They don't bother me. They don't mess with me. They don't try to control what I say. Usually, every once in a while it happens, but usually. But if I'm at a meeting, as a matter of fact, I have a meeting tomorrow, and it's an administrative meeting. My responsibilities and the expectations for that meeting will be completely different. Roles vary based on the different ages and backgrounds of your client. If you're dealing with teenagers, that you'll deal with them one way. If you're dealing with somebody that's an adult, you'll deal with them totally differently. For one thing, if it's a teenager, if it's an underage individual, they don't have the capacity for their own decision-making, potentially. And maybe they are making their own decisions, and they really shouldn't be making their own decisions. But with an adult, they always have the capacity to make their own decisions. So you deal with them differently, especially if you're dealing with a very relatively young individual, somebody that's under the age of 14 or 15. You have to deal with them completely differently than you will somebody that's 16, 17, or 18. And you'll deal differently with them than you would an adult. You'll deal differently with an elderly individual. Is that the right word? Yeah, elderly. I think it's okay. With an elderly individual than you will an adult, even though they're an adult as well. Sometimes their capacity for understanding is truncated by problems that you have as you grow older. Some people have as they grow older, dementia, Alzheimer's disease. So you might potentially deal with them differently. System size, individuals, group families, and organizations. It's turning pink, isn't it? Oh. It all depends on whether you're dealing with one individual or maybe a group or maybe even a family or an organization. And of course, your professionalism has to do with your level of training and the amount of education that you've had. If you are going to work in the field, then probably you'll get a graduate degree, a master's degree, a 2-year degree, if not a PhD. And those individuals with graduate degrees potentially have several roles. One of them is to work independently in a private practice. So you will be able to counsel people without having another counselor in the room, potentially. You might be a counselor or an educator. You might be a supervisor. You might supervise a group of individuals that are doing the counseling, but you're supervising what they're doing. You might become a consultant, and you might become a director. And these are all possible roles for the future. One task that practitioners with graduate degrees may be asked to do is to act as a mediator. Mediator provides an impartial forum for disputing parties to discuss areas of disagreement or misunderstanding. And normally they just get in the middle, make sure that the two sides don't yell at each other, and potentially they may make a decision as to which side wins and which side doesn't win. How's that? Okay, it's possible. It all depends on the mediation and what type of mediation it is. I talked about this before. Dr. Kine is a cognitive psychologist. Dr. Wolf is a neuropsychologist. And I'm a generalist. And we all have different strengths and potentially different weaknesses, but let's pretend we don't have any weaknesses. But we all have different strengths. Their strength, Sarah's strength, of course, is in cognitive psychology. That's the direction that she took. She was very specific as to the type of psychology that she wanted to study. Dr. Wolf, the same thing. She's a neuropsychologist, so she studies the brain. She studies the structures of the brain and whatnot. That's one of the reasons why she's done so much research with concussions. But my form of psychology is as a generalist. I am a generalist. That means that I've studied everything a little bit, to some extent. I don't specifically study one single aspect of psychology. I study all of them. I try to put them all together. I have always been a generalist. When I was working in the laboratory, there's a lot of different sections of the laboratory: microbiology, chemistry, hematology, urinalysis, mycology. There's a lot of different sections. If you are a specificist, then maybe you're just a hematologist, or you're just a chemist, or you're just a microbiologist. But I did all of them. I was able to do all of the areas of the laboratory. And when I started psychology, I couldn't understand why somebody would want to just study one type of psychology. Why would you want to do that when you can have all of this knowledge? Why would you do that? So I became a generalist. As a matter of fact, my PhD is in general psychology, as strange as that may seem. I'm not a cognitive psychologist. I'm not a counseling psychologist. I'm a generalist. Which means I can teach anything. Isn't that exciting? And if you look at the classes that I teach anything. But the point is, as a generalist counselor, one of the things that you'll do is you'll do everything. You'll do case management, where you coordinate and monitor the services for your clients. You'll become a broker, linking your clients with services and resources. Not the easiest job in the world. You will also become their advocate, which means that you are like their lawyer. You're the one that supports your client. You're the one that will go to meetings, and if they have questions about your client, you're the one that will support the client. And that's what a generalist does. Sometimes you have individuals that specialize in case management, or they may be a services broker, or you may have a select individual that all they do is advocate for their clients. The problem with being just an advocate for your clients is that you don't have the background information. You don't have enough background information to really support them. So as a generalist, one of the things you'll do is not only counsel your client, but you'll also try to help your client in several different ways. And if they ever need support with a government agency, you will be the one that advocates for them. And that is what a generalist does. One of the movements in education today is to study one specific thing in one specific area. That's the way education has been moving. But personally, I see that as fairly myopic. In other words, you only see one thing. You're blinded by everything else. You don't really focus on anything else. You're just headed in one single direction. Now that's really good if you can find a job where there's only one thing that you need to do. But there are lots of jobs, especially in counseling, where you need a lot of different information. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to you, and we're going to talk about this in the next chapter, I would suggest to you that you study and read in as many different areas as you possibly can. You need information from a lot of different sources. If you think you're only going to be a counselor, you're going to have to think again, because the reality may be that you need to find out about all of these different diseases that people are talking about. So you may need to get not really a medical background, but you need this information. You need to be able to attain this information. If you're just a counselor and the person comes in, and they say, I've got lupus. Well, how many people know what lupus is? Does anybody know what lupus is? Lupus erythematosus? Anybody? It's an autoimmune disease where the body, the connective tissue starts breaking down. As strange as that sounds. It takes a long time for somebody to really suffer from it, but it's an autoimmune disease, kind of like arthritis. Somebody comes in with asthma. Well, there's a commercial on television about eosinophilic asthma. What in the world is eosinophilic asthma? Does anybody have a clue? They talk about it on television. Come on. You have too many eosinophils in your lungs. And it's causing an asthmatic reaction. Eosinophils, you produce eosinophils to fight off allergens and to fight off parasites. So if you had worms, there's lots of different types of worms, you would create lots and lots of eosinophils. So why shouldn't you want a lot of eosinophils in your lungs? Well, the reason is because it's causing a negative reaction in your lungs. It's causing asthma. You're just producing too many eosinophils, so you have eosinophilia, which is too many eosinophils. Anyway, not important. So the point is, and I'm not trying to scare you, I don't want you to think, oh my God, I'm going to have to get a degree in medicine in order to be able to counsel my clients. You just need background information. You need to read in a lot of different areas. You also need to know what's going on politically, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. You need to know what's going on politically, because your state may be changing the laws. States change laws all the time. So you need to know what laws they're talking about. You need to know whether the people in charge are conservative or liberal. Liberals tend to support taking care of all the people in the state or in the country. And conservatives tend to only want to take care of the people with a lot of money. So they tend to want to cut resources for people that don't have a lot of money. They're the ones that like to cut welfare, conservatives. So you need to know this kind of stuff, right? Because you're going to be dealing with this over and over and over again. So who's the governor this term? You know, who's the governor, and what's the probability that the governor is going to try to support the individuals that are your clients? There's a big argument right now about the Affordable Care Act, commonly called Obamacare. The people in power right now are trying to get rid of Obamacare. Well, one of the things that Obamacare does that no other insurance has done in the past, it covers pre-existing conditions. Insurance in the past, before Obamacare, before the Affordable Care Act was passed, insurance, if you had a problem before you bought that insurance, it wouldn't cover what problem you had before. It didn't cover previous conditions. And that's a huge argument right now. They tried to get rid of Obamacare, and you may remember John McCain's 3 a.m. And he stuck his thumb down saying, I don't agree to get rid of Obamacare. His vote was the vote that kept Obamacare, otherwise we wouldn't have this. So pre-existing conditions, which they have to support pre-existing conditions now, in the future, if they're ever able to get rid of Obamacare, potentially that'll go away. So if you're diabetic, or somebody that you know is diabetic, and you get insurance, all of a sudden you get a job and you get insurance, now they have to cover that diabetes. But if they ever get rid of Obamacare, unless they do something about pre-existing conditions, then that's going to go away, and they don't have to pay anything for anything that has to do with diabetes. Does all that make sense? You guys understand what I'm talking about? So when we're talking about this reservation where you do have a lot of people with diabetes, unless they develop diabetes after you get your insurance, they're not going to cover it. That's the way it works. A lot of people like pre-existing conditions. They like the idea of covering people for pre-existing conditions. You know, I get a job and I've got a kid with multiple sclerosis or cystic fibrosis. Before they didn't have to pay anything for it. I had to pay, everything had to come out of pocket. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm talking about? How horrible it is not to cover something. You know, you get insurance and half of the problems in your family aren't even covered by that insurance. What seems even work? We need the money, so I just forgot to work. So that's the difference. So we need to understand all of this stuff. So when people start screaming about Obamacare, getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, you need to understand that one of the things that they're arguing about is pre-existing conditions. How about that? So we need all this information. The information is extremely important. So you need to accumulate as much information as you possibly can. You need to read in different areas. Being professional goes beyond what you do in your interactions with colleagues and clients. You need to be aware of social, political, economic, and cultural factors that impact the individuals, families, groups, institutions, and advocating for the betterment of your clients. So you need to understand these things. That's what I was just talking about. You need to understand what's going on in the world. You need to understand what's going on in Washington, because they can cut funding. A lot of the state funding is federal funding. The states, and then they funnel it through the states. And depending on what state you live in, it depends on how much money they're actually going to spend on these things. Some states are very, very conservative, so they don't want to put any money into welfare because they're conservative, and the people think everybody needs to take care of themselves. So this is all information that everybody needs. We need to be aware of all this stuff. But we especially need to be aware of it because we're going to be counselors. And we're going to be dealing with people that are starving to death. We're going to be dealing with people that need help, that need advocacy. And that's going to be our job. And that's part of being a professional. Developing a professional identity involves knowing what it means to be a practitioner of your particular discipline. The scope of practice involves knowing what activities, knowledge, and skills identified by licensing boards and professional organizations relate to your discipline. So you're going to have to follow a select a group of rules that have to do with determining how much information that you need. But you're going to have to be licensed, okay? And the license board will tell you what information you need. I hope nobody wrote down what I was saying because it didn't make any sense to me. Well, I'll try to make more sense in the future. Maybe right now. Sometimes organizations will employ groups of professionals that they will organize into working teams. This is what happened in the military. They always put us in working teams, so we were always a group. So you're always working with this guy or that guy, or maybe a group of individuals. I was a laboratory technician, so if I worked in chemistry, then it was all the other people working in chemistry, and we would have to work in tandem. Of course, the military is very hierarchical, so the guy with the highest rank was the guy that was in charge, and he got to tell everybody else what to do, kind of. Of course, we're all working together because we're a working team, so we're all pitching in and trying to get the job done, hopefully. Not always. Some people were just trying to goof off because they didn't want to do as little work as possible. It made them feel like they were making more money than everybody else. If they did less work, I don't know, it didn't make any sense. Each member will bring their own professionalism, their own culture, their own education, and individual ways of dealing with clients. I was working in a pediatrics clinic in Virginia. Where was I? Wait a minute. In Vienna, Virginia. It was Vienna, Virginia, right by Tyson's Corner. Anyway, I was working in a laboratory. It was a pediatrics clinic, and the guy that I worked with was from India. He was Indian, Asian. Okay. He was Aryan. I don't know if that means anything to anybody. Anyway, there's a lot of different groups in India. He was an Aryan, but he was a Seventh-day Adventist. Does anybody know what Seventh-day Adventist is? It's a Christian denomination. Okay. They go to church on Saturday, exactly. They don't eat meat. I don't know, but he was Indian anyway, and he didn't eat meat anyway, so it's really kind of interesting. But he had a real interesting philosophy about things. So when he drew blood, and of course we're drawing blood from kids, and one of the things you have to do to draw blood from a child is to make them as relaxed as possible. So you talk to them and you try to take their mind off of, look at the clown over here when you're sticking with a needle down here on their arm. I know, it's what you gotta do. But he wasn't very good at that. And what he would do, he would say, I don't want you to move your arm. I want you to look at your arm and don't move your arm. And of course, it was his way of dealing with things, and he had a lot more problems. One of the problems with that is that when you tell somebody to concentrate on something, they tighten up. They tighten the muscles up. And of course, it was difficult to get into the vein with the muscles all tightened up. And so we worked on that, but culturally he couldn't do something to somebody because he was a Seventh-day Adventist, because he was Indian, because he had his culture was completely different. He didn't believe in doing something to somebody unless they knew exactly what was going on. So whereas I could draw the blood without any problem, and of course I distracted them as much as possible, I made them think of something else, he thought that was not correct. Philosophically, he didn't think that was correct. So his culture was totally different, and he had a lot more problems getting blood from kids than I did, mainly because of his culture, as confusing as that may be. Okay, working productively with interdisciplinary teams is an important aspect of being a professional. This may mean that the practitioner must learn the language of another profession. Medicine, for example. A lot of times you'll be dealing with an individual that has a medical problem, and because of that, you're going to have to understand what these people are trying to tell you. Of course, I've worked both in medicine and in counseling, so I've never had any problem with it, but I have had colleagues that didn't really understand what the medical personnel were telling them. They didn't understand the nomenclature. We use different words for the same thing. Sometimes we use the same words for the same thing and they were pronounced differently. The only example I can think of right off the top of my head, you know what a centimeter is. You know what a centimeter is. Okay. Well, in medicine they don't call it a centimeter, they call it a sonometer. So it makes it sound like it's something else. A sonometer. So if you're talking to a doctor and he needs 3 sonometers of something, if you don't understand that he's a medical professional and he's going to mispronounce the word, which he's actually pronouncing it the French way. That's the way the French people pronounce it. Centimeter. If you don't understand that, then you don't have any idea what's going on. Sonometer and centimeter. Another one is lupus erythematosus. Doctors pronounce it one way, nurses pronounce it another way, and lab techs pronounce it a completely different way. So you may have heard of lupus erythematosus. What's the other one? Wait a minute, there's three different pronunciations. But as a lab tech, I pronounce it erythematosus. Erythematosus is another way to pronounce it. There's another way. Anyway, every professional must respect the expertise of their professional colleagues, and this is not always the easiest thing in the world, because you've been trained one way and they may have been trained another way. This is something that we run into in psychology all the time. Somebody that is a Freudian believes that what happened to you as a child affects everything that's going to happen to you for the rest of your life. If you're a cognitive behavioral psychologist and you do that type of counseling, you don't deal with the past, you only deal with the present. If you're Rogerian, you don't really deal with the past, you deal with the present. And with the future, of course. So if we have three individuals in the room and one of them practices cognitive behavioral psychology, one practices Rogerian psychology, and the other is a Freudian, you're not going to get them to agree on anything. That's confusing as that is. But we have to respect each other. Okay? Just because your college taught you that this is the right way to do it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. And I understand that because I've been to a lot of different colleges. I actually have attended 11 different universities. I have degrees from 5 of them. But I've attended, 13, I'm sorry. I've attended 13 different universities. And they're all different. And they all have different ideas. And each of these ideas is the only correct answer to any question. But when you're talking about 13 different institutions, then you recognize the fact that sometimes they just don't agree. I mean, Harvard says one thing and Yale says something totally different. So which one is correct? I've never been to either of those institutions, so it doesn't really matter. I went to the University of Northern Colorado, UNC. Yeah, University of Northern Colorado. And they taught Rogerian therapy with using the Egan's model. Is that correct or is that incorrect? Well, not according to Walden University that doesn't use Egan's model at all. Anyway, is none of this making any sense? I love this chapter. The practitioner working in a team must recognize the difference. Different professionals may work toward the same goal using different methods. One of the problems we had when I was in the service was that we would get people in from different laboratories. So here we are, we're working in San Antonio, and we have somebody that was trained in Florida. We have another individual that was trained at Wright Pat in Ohio, and another person that was trained at Tinker in Oklahoma. Now they all learned kind of the same thing, but they learned to do it in a different way. So the guy from Oklahoma wants to do it the way they did it at Tinker. The guy from Ohio wants to do it the way that they did it at Wright Pat in Ohio. And the guy from Florida wants to do it. You understand. Okay. So there are different ways of doing the same thing. Are all of them correct? Probably. They're all different ways of doing the same thing. But at least you're going to get the job done. So if all of you are working together, what you have to do is agree as to how you're going to do it. And this becomes the San Antonio method. Not the Tinker method, not the Wright Pat method, not the Florida method, but the San Antonio method. Even the same profession, practitioners may use different approaches, and of course we have talked about being a cognitivist, being a neurobiologist or neuropsychologist, and being a generalist. Lots of different ways to do the same thing. The trick is to be able to get along with these individuals and to recognize the fact that their method may be as accurate as your method. I know we're not really trained to do this. Religion doesn't train us to be ecumenical, does it? Doesn't religion teach us that there's only one true way. My second wife, she was a born-again Christian, and the Christian movement that she adhered to was the one-way method. There's only one way, and that's to go to heaven. And that's, I never could figure it out. And then their symbol was a finger pointing up. One way. There's one way. Right? Isn't that the way what religion teaches you? If you're a Lutheran, then the Lutheran way is the only way to do it. You can't use the Catholic method. Isn't that the way it works? Okay, I was worried there. I tangled with religions all over the world. I was just wondering. Okay, so the whole point is that in counseling, all these methods may work. So what you have to do is agree as to how you're going to do it. That's all you have to do. There isn't just one way. She had a T-shirt. I won't go into the rest of it. Okay. Your supervisor will help evaluate your level of competency by providing feedback about your use of skills, inviting you to engage in self-reflection. I don't want you to go someplace and say, Bradway told me this, so I know that's the right way to do it. Don't tell them that, because then they'll come back and start bitch slapping me or something. Can I say bitch slapping?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I was worried. Consultation involves meeting with an expert who can help you solve a particular dilemma or a problem. Sometimes your client's problem may be beyond you or your team's ability to handle. At that point, a consultant must be called in to help. Now, one of the great things about being a consultant is they pay you a lot of money. That's all I have to say about that. Sharon Sophie. Really? A lot of money? Okay. Remember, I was a consultant one time with that we were dealing with individuals coming out of prison. And they had all their crimes were sex crimes. And that was the toughest thing I've ever done. I earned every penny of my consultation fee. It was horrible, if you can imagine. Denise, you wanted to know about sexual trauma and dealing with sexual trauma. I just ordered 3 books that deal with that. Okay. So you can read one, and then I'll read one, and then we'll figure out if any of them make any sense. Okay. Everybody's putting their character together. Does anybody have a character that is dealing with a sexual trauma? Is that anybody's character? Nobody, huh? Not a single one of them. Okay. Well, would you? Okay. That would be nice. Okay. We can talk about that in class. Okay. Thank you. This is something that you're going to have to deal with. Yes, ma'am.
I can do one on.
Do you want to do one too?
I can.
Good. Okay. This will help us. This will help us because this is one of the toughest things to talk about. I mean, we don't even like to talk about it in class, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I've got two you guys want to do the sexual trauma thing. If you need another form, I can give you another form for something. Okay. Good.
Is there a way you can email us the form?
Yes.
I don't like writing and have bad handwriting.
I don't like your writing either. So sure, I'll say. How many people need me to send them email them? I'll just email everybody. Okay. You can use either one. Okay. Either the paper form or the online form. Okay. It's a little bit different. It's not the same form. But that's okay. It's the same information. Good. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's going to help everybody in the class. It may be that this is something that you can't handle. Not the two of you, of course. But this may be something that you can't handle. Talking to somebody about sexual trauma. And if that's the case, this may not be the right job for you. Okay? You can be a psychologist without being a counseling psychologist, however. And this is the right time to find out that you can't handle that. I had a sister-in-law that wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to be a teacher all of her life. She wanted to be an English teacher because she is a grammar nerd, She's one of those people that corrected your grammar every time you said something. She was such a pain in the ass. But that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to be an English teacher. And so she lived for 20, 30 years as an adult, raising her family, and then finally she went to school to become a teacher. She got almost all the way through the program. It was a 4-year program, got into the 3rd year. Right at the end of the 3rd year, she realized the only reason she wanted to be a teacher, she didn't like kids. The only reason she wanted to be a teacher was so that she could tell people what to do. She wanted to boss them around. That's the only reason she wanted to be a teacher. So she decided not to become a teacher. It was the most brilliant thing that I've ever seen. I mean, we make plans about what we're going to do in the future, and sometimes we get into a job that we hate. We despise it. We don't want to do it. The only reason we wanted to do it to begin with was because somebody told us we needed to do it. I went to college, a pre-med college, and we had all of these people that were going to become doctors. And why did they want to become doctors? Well, some of them wanted to help people, some of them wanted the money, and some people were told that they needed to be a doctor by their parents. Well, the ones that were told that they needed to be a doctor by their parents, they hated being doctors. But being a doctor is hard work. It's like 16, 18 hours a day, and you have to stay current on all the literature. And if you don't like medicine, my God, reading that stuff is like walking through molasses. Some of these guys died. They died because they were in such a job that they hated. They died of heart attacks. These are the people that I went to college with. I know. The ones that were greedy, that wanted to make a lot of money, they made a lot of money really fast and then they quit. They got out of the game. But the ones that wanted to help people, these are the guys that just poured through the journals, had a great time. They were working 16, 18 hours a day, and they were loving every second of it. And these guys are the ones that are still alive. But the other guys have either dropped out of the game or they're dead. So don't get into a job that you hate, please. It'll kill you. That's why I'm still alive. I love my job. If I didn't like this job, I wouldn't be here. I couldn't do it. But today I'm having trouble talking, but I mean, normally I'm okay. Well, no, maybe not normally. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to remain current on the best practices. We need to continue our education in psychology, but you need to read in a lot of different areas. You need to stay current on the political situation in your area and in the federal government. This is your job. Sorry, you got to figure this stuff out. You got to watch the news, as painful as that may be. So you need to stay current. You need to evaluate your work. Am I doing anything right? I have just evaluated my work. I can't talk today. I'm having a hard time speaking today. I'm evaluating my job as a lecturer today. I'm doing a shitty job. But I'll make it through the day, and so I'm evaluating my work. You need to continue your education in ethical standards every year. In other words, you need to make sure that they haven't changed the ethics. They do. They will change ethics. And usually it has to do with a court case. So there's a court case where somebody had sex with the wrong individual. Maybe it's an underage individual. And now they've changed the ethical code for your job, for your work. Or maybe, like in the case in New Mexico, where they had the 10-year-old girl, Child Protective Services actually saw that case before it happened. And nobody did anything about it. So potentially their ethical standards are going to change. Something is going to change. Because that little girl dropped right through the cracks. And now she's dead. Anyway. So a lot of times it has to do with the court cases. So read the newspaper. There's nothing more depressing than reading the Gallup Independent. It's like the Wild West. It's like one of those books about the Wild West. My God, people are getting shot every day. People are getting stabbed every day. Some people are getting run over. Somebody's girlfriend ran over them with a Jeep. Yeah. 6 people were just shot this morning in Bakersfield, shot and killed in Bakersfield, California. Does anybody know where Bakersfield is? No?
Isn't that like north
North of Los Angeles, out in the desert. It's the first town in the country coming off the mountain into the desert. Yeah, if you go to Las Vegas from Los Angeles, usually that's the road you take through Bakersfield. 6 people. And he started shooting up the town, and he shot 2 people in one place, then he shot 3 people in another place, and then he shot 1 person in a third place. So they've got 3 crime scenes. I know. We have no reason at this point. And I don't think they killed him. I think he's still alive. As interesting as it is. While the practitioner is responsible for structuring the relationship with the client, success can only be reached if the relationship is collaborative, goal-directed, purposeful, and time-limited. So what does all this mean? Collaborative means that you and the client agree as to how you're going to do this. Goal-directed means this is how we will know when we have achieved what we need to achieve. Purposeful means that every session that you have with this individual is aimed toward that goal. That's purposeful. You don't just have a bull session where you talk about your cat, unless your cat's part of the problem. I don't know, a cat could be a part of the problem. My cat brought in, she brought in a bird this morning. It was a tiny little bird. And he went flopping around the house, and I've got 2 dogs, and the dogs got all excited. So that was part of the problem. So right there, bird, cat, okay. So sometimes the cat can be part of the problem. Okay. But it has to be purposeful. It has to be time limited. This is not going to be your friend for the rest of your life. Probably you shouldn't even interact with this individual after she's not your client anymore, or he's not your client anymore. So it has to be time limited. You need to fix them in a select amount of time, or what you consider fixed or what they consider fixed. Maybe you don't think that you're making any progress, and they feel so much better that they drop out of counseling. And that's okay, as long as they feel like they're fixed. And I say fixed, the reality is that rarely happens. It's not a Buick with a bad carburetor. It doesn't, people don't get fixed like that. A relationship between a client and a practitioner is a fiduciary relationship. Fiduciary means trust, that you trust each other. The client has confidence, and they have trust in the practitioner's competency, and so it's a fiduciary or a situation. Fiduciary. Usually we talk about banks being a fiduciary trust, which is a redundancy, right? A fiduciary trust. Anyway. Unequal, the unique nature of professional relations, they are unequal. One person's in charge and the other person is subordinate to them. The client is subordinate to the counselor. So you have to understand that it's unequal. And because of that, that person may become dependent on you, and that's not something that you want. The practitioner will always have more power than the client has, no matter how you do it. Of course, it's supposed to be collaborative. It's supposed to be goal-directed, purposeful, and time-limited, but it's supposed to be collaborative. So it's almost like you're working together. You are working together, but there's always somebody in charge, and that is the practitioner is in charge. Okay. With power comes a responsibility to help a client in a manner that prescribed initially by the practitioner, and of course you're the one that decides what that is. I apologize for the picture, it doesn't quite. Usually people don't come in bathing suits to be counseled, but one person has power. The point is that one person has power and the other person is subordinate to them. Okay. I'm not sure what she's got on. Anyway, it's yellow, whatever it is. That's all I can say. Okay, and that's the end of the chapter. I know it's a really, really short chapter. So, what time is it? 9:52. I got lots of time. Okay, the next chapter, the next chapter is chapter 5. This is the 4th week. I want everybody to tell your friends. 4th week, I'm on the 5th chapter. I'm ahead, okay? All your friends, don't forget. You can brag me up all you like. That's fine. Doesn't hurt my feelings at all. Okay, we're going to talk about developing working relationships. We're developing working relationships with our clients. So that's what we're going to talk about. Teamwork. A practitioner should begin a professional relationship by determining how they will present themselves and how they will behave. So before you, and I do this every time I come into class, am I going to act like a jackass today? I always ask myself that question, and the answer is always yes. That's exactly how I'm going to act in class. But you have to do this, and of course with your clients, of course, the point is, should I be happy? Should I be sober? Should I be sober? You should always be sober, meaning not drunk. Okay, but. Should I be grouchy? Some people think professionalism is grouchiness. I don't agree. I know. You probably had professors that never smiled. I'm thinking, do you ever have professors that never smile? Is there anybody here that doesn't smile? I'm trying to think of somebody. Don Robinson? No. No. Here I am thinking of my colleagues, I shouldn't do that. Okay, so you have to decide how grouchy or how happy you're going to be. Some people don't like it, and sometimes you'll think, well, I'm just going to be as pleasant as I possibly can, and then you shake hands with the person doesn't smile back. And you realize that the only way that you're going to interact with this individual is if you act the way that they're acting. Because that's what they want. And that's okay. You can change your style if you have to fit the client. But only fit that client. I mean, if you start acting that way with all the other clients, they're going to wonder, who peed in your Cheerios or something. You've heard that term, right? Who pissed in your Cheerios? Just this morning, okay. This is the first time you've heard of it. Okay. Cornflakes, it's usually cornflakes, not Cheerios. What am I talking about?
It changes with the generation.
There you go. So what kind of cereal do you guys eat?
Cereal?
Cereal, yeah. Cornflakes, Cheerios, Rice Krispies. I'm sorry?
Honey Nut Cheerios.
Honey Nut Cheerios? There we go. See, Honey Nut Cheerios.
Huh?
What type of cereal?
Let me think about it. Oh, life cereal.
Life cereal, of course. Sure.
Wait,
What
I'm
do you
with
eat?
baby.
Fruit Loops? If I said Fruit Loops, they think I was silly. Fruit Loops?
Anything doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Of course
Hot
not.
cereal.
Hot cereal, there you go. Cream of wheat. Oh, I love cream of wheat. With maple syrup. Real maple syrup, not
Yeah,
that.
not the added.
Yeah. Oatmeal? Not cream of wheat? Honey Nut Cheerios, yeah. I remember that.
I think that honey bunches of oats.
Honey Bunches of Oats. You don't eat cereal? Honey Bunches of Oats again? Okay, so Honey Bunches of Oats and Fruit Loops.
I used to like Captain Crunch, but then it kind of puts your mouth.
It chops your mouth out? That's so funny. Who
It's like
likes
so good, but it's so deadly.
we don't want anything that's deadly. Okay, so you have to decide how you're going to react to your client. Sometimes you have to change your behavior because that is what the client's looking for. And we need to do this because if you don't, you're going to lose the client. You're going to lose them right away. I have had students. Normally I have a whole room full of students and I act the same way with all my classes, but then I'll have one student that I can't get them to smile. Sometimes it's Chris.
Which is what I'm saying.
But some people don't think that you're serious unless you're grouchy. I've had students that didn't smile the entire class and then they complained about me. You write the evaluation, he's too frivolous. There's something wrong with that guy. And they're probably right about there's something wrong with that guy, but I don't know about the true frivolous part. So it's important for the practitioner to set aside your personal feelings and concerns in order to fully focus on your client. If you've got a problem, it's going to be tough for you to be a counselor because, or well, that's not fair. If you can't take that little piece of problem that you have and set it over here so that it doesn't bother you, then you're going to be working on your problem with your client. And that's not right. So you have to be able to separate yourself from your problems. You have to have a multiple personality disorder where you can take that problem and set it aside. Not the easiest thing in the world. I told you about my cat and the bird, the dogs. The other thing is, if you've got a really serious problem that has happened, something has happened to you in the past, and it's something that you need to deal with. I've already told you that one of the reasons I went into psychology was because I had a wife that abandoned me and my kids. And I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. Is this the way it's going to be in the future? Is this all women? Well, I know it wasn't all women. My mother didn't do that. And my sisters didn't do that. So maybe it's just the women that I'm attracted to. Who should I be attracted to next? That was a question that I needed to answer. I mean, here I thought that we were going to be married forever. I mean, that's what the wedding vows said. It lasted 4.5 years. So then I got married again, and guess what? I made the same damn mistake I made the first time. Evidently, I'm not real bright. So as a psychologist, I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. Was it me or was it them? Right? That's logical, isn't it? So I needed to deal with my own problem. I couldn't counsel anybody that was female because I might start thinking of them as my first wife, especially if they had long straight hair, just like my first wife. Or frosted hair, like my second wife. My God, she had frosted hair. She looked like a Christmas tree. Oh my God, what's wrong with my picker? My picker's busted. You know, sometimes we just have broken pickers. So when we pick a wife or a husband or, you know, a significant other, sometimes we pick the wrong one. And we keep picking the same one over and over again because this is what we're attracted to. So sometimes your picker's broken. And you can take that one to the bank. I've seen lots of people with broken pickers. People that just choose the wrong people. It just happens. Anyway, so if you've got a problem, you need to deal with that. You need to not be thinking about that when you see your client. It is important that a practitioner accepts and understands the client's beliefs, perceptions, their stereotypes, their biases, their prejudices, and their life experiences. We need to know who this person is. And sometimes you can tell these things from the very first time you talk to them. You don't have to question them. You can just look at them. You can look at the way that they're dressed. You can look at the way that they answer questions. And you can get these little pieces of information. What do we do about religion? What do we do about their belief system? Well, you need to figure this out right away. Because there's some people you can't talk to about religion. And there are some people that if you mention religion, all of a sudden that's the only direction that they're going to go. Even though that doesn't have anything to do with their problem. So you got to be careful as to how you breach a subject. Or whether to breach a subject. Belief systems are one of those things that you need to stay away from if you possibly can. Another one is politics. You know, it's religion, politics, the things you're not supposed to talk about in public. You know, these things they'll come up, and of course they will taint everything that the client says. And you don't need to deal with that. Probably their problem isn't Donald Trump. Or the fact that everybody hates Donald Trump and I know that he's the most perfect person in the whole wide world. That's probably not their problem. They may have prejudices against select things, or select people, or select institutions. Stay away from their prejudices. The core interpersonal qualities that a practitioner brings to a relationship includes your warmth, your respect you have for everybody, your genuineness, your empathy, and your acceptance. You accept everybody. It's not the easiest thing in the world to respect everyone. We can all probably come up with somebody that it's very, very difficult to respect. A pedophile, for example. How in the world do you respect a pedophile? That's a tough one. I know. It's hard. It's rough dealing with those individuals because that doesn't make any sense, does it? They rape children. They seduce children. Sometimes they murder children. How do you deal with that? I mean, that doesn't fit anything. That doesn't fit in anything. It just doesn't.
You work with pedophiles before?
Yeah. It's tough. They're big liars. They're the worst. They are so bad. I mean, they're almost like alcoholics. Alcoholics are the best liars in the world. No, that's not true. People with antisocial personality disorder are the best liars in the world. They won't tell you the truth. You have no idea. I mean, you can ask them all the questions you want, and they'll tell you the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, and then the most important question that you ask them, it will be a lie. And since they told you the truth all up to this point, why isn't that the truth? They are so good at it. Usually an alcoholic, they'll just lie all the way through. But with a person with antisocial personality disorder, they're very selective as to what they lie about. But you can't tell the difference between them telling the truth and them lying. Usually people get a little, they change the way that they say something if it's a lie. They'll clear their throat, they'll say it deeper, or they'll say it at a higher register. They'll change the way that they're talking, as much fun as that is. Anyway, so you need to be the same person. You need to be warm. You need to respect your client, no matter who the client is. This was a really serious problem with social work back in the 1950s and 1960s in the South, because most of the people they needed to help were African American, and almost all the social workers were white. Well, they were white Southerners, and that was a problem, because white Southerners don't always respect African Americans. And so they had a great deal of prejudice against these individuals. So they had a hard time respecting the people that they were dealing with. When I was up in Montana, we had exactly the same problem. But it was a problem with white people and natives. Most of the people working at Child Protective Services were white. Most of the individuals dealing with TANF were white. And a lot of the individuals coming in for help were native. And a lot of these ladies from Chinook, these ladies that had gone to the University of Northern Montana, they didn't like Indians at all. And here they were surrounded by reservations. And almost all the people they had to deal with were American Indians, and they didn't respect them. It was a really serious problem. This is how bad it was. So most of the problems, most of the people that they needed to see were natives, and they lived on the reservations. So where did they put the offices for all of these services? They put it on the reservation? That would be logical. No, hell no, they didn't put it on the reservation. These ladies didn't want to drive to the reservation every day. They put it in the White City. So in order to get services, you had to drive from the reservation to Chinook. That didn't make any sense, did it? Well, it did for the people that were putting it together, because they didn't respect the individuals they were dealing with. So some of these individuals didn't have cars, so how in the world did they ever get their services? They had to hitchhike.
Still like that today,
The way it is here?
yeah. So the trouble with pharmacy ballot. I appointment and
That's not right. Let's change all that. Let them ask me, and I'll get that all changed. Okay. That was a really serious problem. I had one of my students had just had a baby, and she needed to get what is it TANF? TANF, because she just had a baby, and she was a student. She wasn't making hardly any money. Her husband wasn't her husband yet. He was still her boyfriend.
Turnip or Wick?
Wick, it was Wick. She needed to go get Wick. The town, Chinook was like 28 miles away from the reservation. And she had to hitchhike in the heat with her baby. And it's hot up there. It's as hot up there as it is down here. With her baby. What is she going to do with her baby? Now, she's breastfeeding, so what is she going to do with her baby? She can't leave him with anybody. So she had to hitchhike the 28 miles to Chinook. Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, we need to respect our clients. Trust can be developed by being understanding or empathetic, listening attentively, and showing respect for your client. Okay. Warmth, being kind and accepting in a non-judgmental way. Expression of warmth in one culture may be perceived differently in another culture, so you need to be careful. You need to understand that culture. Would you deal with white people the way you would deal with a native person? Are they different? Do they expect different you to act a different way? Okay. And you recognize that we're dealing with two different cultures here. Not all white people act like I do. I'm a quintessential white person. Everybody that's white acts just like me and Sarah. Okay? Sarah's from Canada. Okay, she's a Canadian. She's a white Canadian, all right? So maybe she doesn't act the same way as everybody else here. Okay. Okay. Cheek touching is commonly used to show warmth in many cultures around the world. Would you touch cheeks with your clients? What about your native clients? Are you guys cheek touchers? Oh, no. Okay. Shake hands? As far away as possible? There we go. Okay. Got a good shake in the hand. Okay. But no cheek touching. But if you were dealing with a French person, they would want you to touch their cheek. You wouldn't touch their cheek? Okay. All right. If you're dealing with a native from up north, they'd want to hug you. They're big huggers. Would you do that? Wow. Could you do that?
Is it ethical?
Is it ethical to hug them? Well, they hug everybody. I mean, everybody. You ought to see their powwows. It's just a lot of hugging going on. Somebody wins an award, they shake hands, and then they give them a big hug. I know, it's different. Could you do that? If it was one of those crazy guys from up north, Blackfeet or Sioux. Oh, don't hug the Sioux. I'm just kidding. They're fun people. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's emotions, feelings, thoughts, and behavior from that person's viewpoint. As we attune to another person's internal state, a feeling of being connected develops. If you understand what they say, and this is one of the reasons why, if you are practicing Rogerian therapy, in Rogerian therapy, you try to identify the emotion and then you repeat it to them. So you're feeling sad. And because you are identifying their emotions correctly, they feel closer to you. Does that make sense? I know, it's a trick. So you're feeling sad, and so because I identified your sadness, now all of a sudden you feel like, I understand where you're coming from. No, it's a trick. Be careful. These guys will get into your head. Okay, being empathic involves having the willingness and the flexibility to put yourself in another person's reality, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. You have to understand their reality. Empathy is understanding assumptions, beliefs, and or the worldview of that select individual. Empathy requires understanding another person's subjective experience while maintaining the capacity to differentiate from that person. So you have to understand their experience. This is really difficult to do if you're dealing with somebody who's a combat veteran. So their reality deals with whatever horrors they saw while they were in combat. That is part of their world, that becomes part of their worldview. If there are enemies out there that want to kill me, now maybe nobody's ever tried to kill you, I hope. I hope none of you, but anybody's ever tried to kill any of you. But this is an individual that was living in an environment where everybody was trying to kill him. So that may be part of their worldview. Empathy is not the same as pity or sympathy. Pity involves sorrow or grief aroused by someone else's suffering. Sympathy involves feeling affected, the feelings affected whatever affected the other person, and that's sympathy. You should never feel pity for your clients. You should never feel pity for your clients. Because that's your emotion.
Just sympathy.
You can feel empathy and you can feel sympathy, but never pity.
Oh,
You can be sympathetic, you can be empathetic, but if it arouses that type of emotion in you, then you're not going to be able to deal with their problems. Okay. You have become too emotional with your client. So don't feel pity for them. That's almost insulting if you think about it. Because what you're telling them by pitying them is that they are at a lower point, and what you need to do is identify their strengths, not their weaknesses. And pity identifies their weaknesses. Okay? No pity. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time.